1 year ago, Israel launched a brutal assault on the people of Gaza. 12 months on, that onslaught continues. Despite growing international condemnation, trade embargoes, and warnings of further escalation, Israel is continuing its attacks. Will the 1 year mark add any new pressure on Israel? I'll break it all down here on Straight Talk. Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Al-Arianm. It's been 1 year since Israel launched its all-out invasion of Gaza. Over those 12 months, Israel unleashed airstrikes on an almost daily basis, leveling entire neighborhoods. After weeks of constant bombardment from the sky, the Israeli military sent in its ground troops. A year later, health officials in Gaza say more than 41,000 Palestinians have been killed, with nearly 100,000 injured, a large portion being women and children. Continued international pressure for a ceasefire has also failed, with U.S. President Joe Biden entering his final weeks of his presidency. Israel's assault on Gaza is seeing no end in sight. Let's take a look at what the people of Gaza have endured over the past year.
Bomb blasts, hunger, and uncertainty. This is what the people of Gaza have been waking up to for the past year. On October 7, 2023, Hamas launched a surprise attack on Israel, killing nearly 1,200 people and taking hundreds of hostages. The Israeli army responded with an unprecedented scale of airstrikes, killing hundreds and displacing more than 74,000 in just a few days. The attacks intensified into a ground offensive in the following months, with Israeli soldiers giving Gazans very little time to vacate several areas. Nowhere was safe.
Last night, Shifa Hospital was airstruck by, according to what they told us, by white phosphorus. This is a type of weapon that is not permitted on international level.
Despite the humanitarian crisis, the US has repeatedly vetoed UN resolutions to stop the fighting. US President Joe Biden and Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited Israel on separate occasions, but failed to secure a ceasefire. UN officials have continued their calls for Israel to allow humanitarian aid to reach the people of Gaza, but Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has remained defiant, ignoring both international and US calls for restraint and not to expand the war. A year after Israel launched its invasion of Gaza, nearly 42,000 people have been killed, including 16,000 children and 11,000 women. 288 workers and 174 journalists have also lost their lives in Israeli airstrikes and other attacks.
One of the key findings is that Israel's executive and military leadership and soldiers have intentionally distorted, using bellow principles, subverted their protection functions in an attempt to legitimize genocidal violence against the Palestinian people.
Late last year, South Africa approached the International Court of Justice, accusing Israel of committing genocide. They were later joined by Turkey, with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan saying Ankara was providing documents for the case. Turkey has cut all trade ties with Israel and has urged others to follow suit. The country has also been sending a massive amount of aid to Gaza and negotiating safe passage for Palestinians to escape. During his speech to the UN General Assembly last month, President Erdogan called out Western countries for their inaction.
Children are not the only ones dying in Gaza. At the same time, the United Nations system is dying. The truth is dying. The values that the West claims to defend are dying.
But fears that the war wouldn't be limited to Gaza have come true. Israel expanded its airstrikes and ground invasion into Lebanon, killing Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah and hundreds of others last month. Iran responded with its own barrage of missile strikes that hit several Israeli military bases and cities. Now the world waits to see how far Israel and Iran are willing to take this war, and if other countries will be dragged in. Engin Savcın, Straight Talk.
For more on the past year in Gaza, joining me now from Istanbul is Sami Al-Arianm, a professor at Istanbul Sabahittin Zaim University. From The Hague, Katrin Ravey, a legal advisor to Law for Palestine. And from London, Omar Ashour, a professor at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies. Thank you for joining me. I want to begin, we're looking back at the past year. So when we're looking back at the past year, what Israel wanted to do in Gaza, has it achieved what it set out to do? I want to begin with you, Sami.
Well, there are some declared objectives and goals that Israel has declared for itself. And there are ones that are not public, not announced. First, they said that they wanted to release the captives without paying the price for it, which is to release Palestinian prisoners. Second, they wanted to make sure that Hamas would not be there in Gaza, that it cannot attack it anymore, and that they will be able to dislodge it from the rule of Gaza and end Hamas forever. And also, the undeclared one basically had to do with devastating Gaza, wreaking havoc on Gaza, making sure that there will be no civil life right after they are done with Gaza. And that's what they have been doing. From that score, they have been able to do a lot of killing, a lot of destruction. But I think the Palestinians have shown through their resilience and resistance and steadfastness that they're not going anywhere. At the beginning, they were trying to continue what they didn't do during the 1948 dispossession of Palestinians. But so far, they have failed in doing that, even though they have committed atrocities unimaginable in today's world.
Omar, Sami said that one of the objectives is obviously defeating Hamas. Now, Hamas is more of an ideology as well as an organization, let's call it. Can Hamas be defeated? Can you wipe out an ideology? Can you wipe out a movement just militarily on the ground?
The short answer is no. You can defeat or degrade, and they did degrade so far, the military dimension of that organization. The political, ideological, the whole idea of resistance to occupation, that you can't defeat. That you can't defeat militarily. It needs a whole other dimensions. But what they have done so far, their operational objectives, shall we say, was primarily military and security. So undermine, degrade Hamas, degrade its military capabilities, try to rescue the hostages, and more or less topple it as a ruling, as the political governance of Gaza. So on the three dimensions, on the first one, the undermining, they did do some damage. It was the 27th of October, after the 8th of October, basically airstrikes, 2023, and from the 27th of October, we saw a ground assault, mechanized, armored, and basically all 7 dimensions of warfare: land, air, sea, electronic, cyber, intelligence, space even, were all involved. We saw the first ever space confrontation with the Arrow 3 air defense intercepting a ballistic missile coming from Yemen. So all dimensions of warfare were there against an outnumbered, outgunned, and pretty much out everything groups of Palestinian resistance.
Katrin, more than 40,000 dead, 100,000 injured. Now, every conflict obviously has collateral damage throughout human history, but from an international law perspective, having so many civilians, women and children killed, when is that line crossed from a legal perspective, and when did Netanyahu cross that line?
Well, I think it's important to contextualize what's happened since October 7th in the broader context. I mean, this is deeply rooted in a long-standing violation of international law dating back to 1948 and the illegal occupation since 1967. And these events have been intrinsically linked to a context of inequality, prolonged illegal occupation, historically oppressive structures, institutionalized systems of discrimination, apartheid. And what this really is, and we should call it what it is, it's a genocide. And this is before the ICJ as we speak. I mean, this is not something to be won. This is seeking to destroy a part of the population, a Palestinian population. And Israel has absolutely violated multiple laws under multiple bodies of international law that it said it would certainly uphold in the effort of the eradication of Palestinians.
Well, Sami, why is international law not able to be implemented? We just heard Katrin talk about it. Why are we not seeing any type of implementation? The UN has basically been useless. There is a group of countries that are obviously pursuing international law at the ICJ, but why have bodies not been able to stop conflicts, most specifically what's going on right now in Gaza, but broadly throughout the world since these post-World War II institutions have been formed?
The main reason is the structure of the international system. It's been structured since World War II as the great powers being in charge, particularly the United States. It's the obstruction of the United States. The United States does not allow Israel to be punished, not only this year, but throughout its history. The U.S. has cast about 87 vetoes in its history since the UN was founded back in 1945, 48 of which have been on behalf of Israel. There are over 900 resolutions that have been passed by the Security Council and the General Assembly. None of them, and I repeat, none of them have been implemented. And the main reason is because Israel never gets to be held accountable. And if no one is held accountable, why would they do anything? And we've seen throughout this year, the United States has provided Israel not only with political protection and diplomatic cover, but also it is the main country that has financed its invasions, its atrocities, its genocide, its ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. Over $20 billion of arms have been already transferred to Israel. Almost every day there is one load of planes giving Israel the 2,000 pound, 1,000 pound, 500 pound bombs that have been used against the Palestinians, killing tens of thousands. That is the main reason why no one is holding accountable, even though we have seen multiple times the ICJ ruling on, against Israel, asking it to halt its invasion, halt its war against the Palestinians, asking it to provide humanitarian aid. And every time Israel defies the will of the international community, the will of the ICJ, it's the United States there to protect it.
Sami, just a quick reaction. What are your thoughts on Turkey's performance over this past year?
I mean, Turkey is certainly under tremendous pressure from the United States as well as from other neighboring countries not to get deeply involved in this. And I think Turkey in the past few months has taken more assertive role trying to stop this genocide. Whether the president or the foreign minister, they have been trying to get the cooperation of neighboring countries and pressure the U.S. behind the scenes. But so far, they have failed to stop this genocide because it is determined to continue its genocidal policies until it achieves its goals. And we've seen now this escalating into Lebanon. But I think at the end, Israel would which never, by the way, learns from the lessons of the past. It will also be these policies will fail.
Omar, the pretense behind the invasion of Gaza was that Hamas is there. Hamas attacked October 7th. This is retaliation. But we've seen this expanded into the West Bank. We've seen this expanded into southern Lebanon. We've seen this expanded into Syria. Is Netanyahu after a regional war? Is this what he wants?
Well, clearly he believes that he can launch a regional war and win it. And the issue there is that he's primarily targeting non-state actors who are lesser in terms of their military capabilities, but proved to be quite resilient at the same time. So in Gaza, the loss exchange ratio, how many Israeli soldiers die versus how many Palestinian fighters die, is mainly on the side of Israel. They did not lose much. Just to put it in perspective, in 15 years, they lost about 300 soldiers in Lebanon, in South Lebanon, between 1985 and 2000, and they withdrew primarily not because of the military losses, but because of the political pressures. In Gaza, in 7th of October, there was about over 300 killed on the Israeli side, and afterwards there were a similar number. Now it probably exceeded a bit. But also the political will is still there. So even though the military losses are compared to 15 years conflict in Lebanon is high, the political will is still, because of the current government, is still there to continue the fight, but not just keep it in Gaza, but also to expand it elsewhere in the West Bank. What they're trying to do in Gaza is pretty much a West Bank scenario. If you look so far, there's no clear strategy, but the operational plan is to West Bank Gaza, so dissect it into north and south via the Netzarim corridor, take about 60 square kilometers buffer zone to push make this buffer zone or security zone between quotations between Gaza and Israel, and also control the Philadelphia corridor, which is also taking another part of Gaza on the Egyptian border. So West Banking basically Gaza, but without an authority there, without a PA, a Palestinian authority to run it.
Omar said something interesting, that Netanyahu's only targeting non-state actors, and he talked about their military prowess being a reason why. Katrin, I have two questions for you. Is one of the reasons why he's targeting non-state actors also because legally it's easier for him to justify attacking non-state actors rather than a sovereign state? And I also want you to evaluate the ICJ case, how far it's come, what you expect going forward, and also Turkey's support for the case.
I think to answer your first question, I mean, from a legal standpoint, no, it does not make it easier to attack a non-state actor versus a state entity. And attacks on Lebanon are indeed an attack on the Lebanese sovereignty. Netanyahu does not, will use any justification really to justify his actions. We've seen lots of legally questionable arguments, but this isn't really about being lawful. The Israeli military has a profound history of never really abiding by international law and enjoying a lot of impunity that comes along with those illegal attacks, including weaponry, a type of war, invasions. I mean, this is right out of the Israeli playbook. And I think that is something the ICJ is trying to really confront. I think we have seen enormous impunity granted to Israel for decades. I think this latest push at the ICJ is this next step in trying to overcome this entrenched impunity. And we've seen a lot of support for it. And it's an important case indeed. I mean, the recent advisory opinion that came out is crucial in naming the apartheid system that's been happening, calling for an end for the illegal occupation that we've seen now turned into a UN resolution, which really shouldn't be understated. But we have to remember that international law is dependent on state will. Accountability only comes in the form of state collaboration and cooperation. And so this advisory opinion, this general resolution, and of course the ongoing case at the ICJ regarding genocide are all going to be dependent on states' ability to push forward and implement these rulings. And as has been mentioned, the United States and the Security Council in general poses a huge impediment to that actually being implemented. And that really comes from a background of colonialism that was entrenched in the UN system, namely through the veto power at the UN Security Council. So it is indeed important to keep pushing our accountability systems as far as they can go to prevent this ongoing onslaught of violations of international law. But really, it will depend on world order.
Mm-hmm. The implementation of international law depends on state collaboration. I really like that. And Sami, when you're looking at collaboration in the Muslim world, whether it's the Arab League, whether it's the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, or whether bilaterally amongst Muslim majority states, how do you view that state collaboration? Is there enough unity to support implementing international law, at least amongst the Muslim states, to be able to push the West towards implementation?
Organization of Islamic Conference, or the Muslim states in general, Arab states, they let down the Palestinians. It's a miserable situation, and it's due basically to the fact that there are very few countries in that region that are truly independent, that are truly sovereign. The United States has a lot of leverage, has a lot of influence within these states. Back on November 11th, about 5 weeks after October 7th, they met in Saudi Arabia, and they couldn't agree on anything except one thing, which is to provide Palestinians with the humanitarian aid. All the calls to confront the Israeli aggression, and by the way, it is not a war against non-state actors or Hamas, it's a war against the Palestinians. That's what we've been witnessing for the past year. It's a war that has not spared a single Palestinian in any neighborhood, civilian or otherwise. It has claimed children as much as 40%, and women, both combined, would be about 70% of the casualties. So this is a war against the Palestinians. But even when they met, I counted there are at least 5 million soldiers, about 25,000 tanks, probably over 20,000 planes. None of them have been mobilized to do any threat against this state that has been waging this war against the Palestinians. And even when they decided to provide humanitarian aid, they could not provide a single bottle of water to the Palestinians except when Netanyahu would agree to it. What we see today is a complete control and hegemony of Israel over the region, and that's why this situation is in grave danger. And the Israelis are trying to reclaim back, to restore what they thought they had before October 7th, which is a complete dominance and hegemony over the region. That is, that they could basically deter anybody. And their military doctrine has been undermined. The military doctrine of the Israelis depend on 6 imperatives. I will go over them pretty quickly. Each and every one of them has been undermined through this invasion and this atrocities and this bombing and this war. Namely, they are preemptive strikes, effective deterrence, early warning, strong defense, quick resolution of the conflict, and escalation dominance. Each and every one of them has been undermined, and what they're trying to do is to restore this image that they are the invincible army of this region, that they are in total control and they can dictate. And that's what Netanyahu has been trying to do, but he would lose.
Omar, the U.S. says it wants a ceasefire, but at the same time, it's still supplying money and weapons to Israel. Where does the U.S. stand right now, and can it create, or does it have the will for a ceasefire?
It's very complex with the U.S. And also, I just wanted to clarify the non-state actor attack. Of course, the main target is Hamas, Hezbollah, but also they don't care who they kill if they are standing by or standing beside a targeted depot, an ammunition spot, or a location of 5 fighters of Hamas moving. You know, it is very clear that they have a very high tolerance of who dies in terms of civilians, and they don't care, and they get away with it. So that needs to be clarified. But for the U.S., it was always a problem for the U.S. It's not a new problem. Trying to more or less tell the Israelis what to do is not working. And it hasn't been working. In '67, the famous meeting with Johnson, Abba Eban, the Israeli foreign minister, when he met him, and he told him, if you attacked, you cannot count on our support. I am swamped in Vietnam right now, and I cannot support you. If you got attacked by the Arabs, so don't attack first, don't strike first. That was the message. They still struck first. So it's not always, do this and they will do it. They will resist and they will take the action and then apologize later on. So this seems to me even more complex now with the U.S. coming elections, with the very strong pro-Israeli lobby, whether in both houses of the Congress, but also outside of that. So they have a lot of influence, I would say, within the U.S. domestic politics. And even if that influence somehow was undermined, they still have agency, and that needs to be very clear.
Sami, Al-Arianm, Katrin, Ravey, and Omar, Ashour, thank you for joining me and reviewing this past year in the war on Gaza. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Al-Arianm. If you got any comments, please share them with us on X at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.